For every person who says Rolex is the best brand in the world, there's another person who finds them boring. As the best-selling luxury watch brand in the world, they certainly have a target on their back. Maybe you don't want to pay a premium for a Rolex, or maybe you respect them but just aren't drawn to them. So our challenge for today is to match 10 major Rolex models with their most worthy competitors. Each alternative will be somewhat cheaper than the Rolex in question, but we're also not going to stretch too much and say that a Seiko is comparable to a Daytona, for example, even if it's arguably better value for money. This list will naturally not include every watch worth mentioning, so if there's a favorite of yours, a formidable contender that should have gotten the spotlight, please shout it out in a comment below. Also, please subscribe to the channel if you have a sec. We're starting off with the Rolex Datejust. For many, it's the go anywhere, do anything watch that can take you from the office to the beach and back again. That versatility is what we're looking for in the #1 alternative. Grand Seiko comes to mind, and they've been called the Rolex of the East more than once. The craftsmanship here is spectacular, and thanks to Tanaka's grammar of design, there's lots of angular detail to sink your teeth into. The Heritage Collection is perhaps the most popular example of this, with intricate dials based on the seasons. These watches are a few seconds less accurate than a Rolex, and the power reserve indicators are not everyone's favorite. But in terms of details per dollar and overall aesthetics, I give Grand Seiko the edge. Another watch commonly cited as a worthy alternative is the Cartier Santos. The Santos is known for its blend of brutalist case and bracelet architecture with its classically elegant Cartier dial. This is perhaps a preferred option if you lean more towards dress watches than all-out sport watches. However, the newer versions of the Santos do feature luminous hands and hour markers and 100 meters of water resistance. The movement is nothing to brag about, but again, the Santos is arguably the better looking watch. Finally, the Omega Seamaster Aquaterra. You get the sportiness, you get the elegance, you get the versatility that you're after, and there's the master chronometer certified movement thanks to the proprietary coaxial escapement. The dial is more symmetrical than the Datejust, and the details like the hands, hour markers, and twisted lugs can certainly be seen as an advantage. Next up is the Rolex Submariner. The qualities we're looking for here are a time-tested dive watch that can take a beating. Two brands come to mind, Omega and Tudor. Now, I want to mention the Blancpain 50 Fathoms because it's arguably the world's first dive watch, and because the design can be quite compelling. But the mil-spec versions are too expensive to be included here, and the version that is comparably priced is 45 millimeters, which is too large for the vast majority of people. This brings us to the Omega Seamaster family. If you're a James Bond fan, you know that 007 wore both a Rolex Submariner and an Omega Seamaster. You may also have an affinity for variations like the Seamaster 300, the Diver 300M, or the Planet Ocean, which each have their advantages. Regardless of your choice, you get the build quality you'd expect from a brand like Omega, and with the 300, you get military heritage and a mid-century design that has proved to be handsome for decades. Now, if the Submariner has been your dream watch since you were a kid, go for that, honestly. But if you're looking for value for money, I'd say Omega takes the cake here. This brings us to Tudor. Of course, people will instantly point out that Tudor is a down-market subsidiary of Rolex and therefore can't compete in the same league. But if you're a sports watch enthusiast who uses the watches as intended, you may have a differing opinion. It's starting to become a cliche that Tudor now is what Rolex used to be, but all cliches are born from truth. The Black Bay line has been a fan favorite since it launched, and the BB58 has only cemented that reputation. It may have even kept some satisfied customers from later purchasing a Submariner. Maybe. For the Pelagos, the appeal is in the specs as well as in the perception. Coming in at 39 and 42 millimeters with a titanium case, the Pelagos is quite comfortable and fits a wider range of wrists. You've got strong lume, great bezel action, and enough water resistance for the average diver, who, let's be honest, are few and far between. And now that the Submariner is steadily moving into luxury territory, there are watch fans who long for the old days of Rolex when tool watches were tool watches, and that works in favor of the Tudor Pelagos. When it comes to the Rolex GMT-Master and GMT-Master II, the task is a little tougher, although maybe there's a watch I'm missing. The main competitor here comes from the Grand Seiko SBGJ 237 and 239, for the simple reason that you can simultaneously track 3 time zones instead of 2. That's thanks to the rotating bezel combined with the internal 24-hour ring. If you're into tool watches, then this plain and simply offers you more tools to work with. You of course have GMT options from brands like Omega, Tudor, JLC, and others, but perhaps the toughest competition comes from the adjacent category of world timer watches. These offer similar functionality as a GMT, but in an even more cosmopolitan package. Key competitors in this rough price range come from Omega with the Seamaster Aquaterra World Time, the IWC Pilot World Timer, and the JLC Polaris World Timer. You of course also have watches that combine a chronograph with a GMT or world time function, but realistically these might be a bit of a stretch for a true GMT competitor. Again, the GMT category seems to lean in favor of Rolex, but drop a comment if there's another one worth mentioning. Next, let's look at a watch that dares to be a little different. It seems a little odd that the Rolex specifically designed for scientists has perhaps the most countercultural feel of the bunch. When I think of the Milgauss and the people that are drawn to it, I think of people that want a daily driver that's outside the norm. For that, we've got a few Omegas that come to mind. Now, the most direct competitor is the Omega 15,000 Gauss. It's also designed to resist magnetic interference, although that's not a realistic concern for the vast majority of people, especially considering most modern sport watches offer more than enough protection from day-to-day magnetic encounters. Visually, this watch is a good match thanks to the yellow accents and this bumblebee-like seconds hand. It's similar to the Milgauss in terms of size, material, and performance, and I wish you'd see more of these Omegas on the street and at watch meetups. Also from Omega, you could definitely consider the Seamaster Aquaterra in a more expressive dial color. You've got quite the range of colors and sizes to choose from, so you can get more personal with your selection. Personally, I go for the Summer Blue Edition. Finally, from Omega, you've got the Railmaster. It shares similar scientific origins as the Milgauss, and that striking broad arrow hour hand of the trilogy version gives some much appreciated visual punch. There are, of course, more subtle versions of the Railmaster if you prefer. Lastly, not from Omega, it's the IWC Ingenieur. This watch is another model that's graduated from the sciences to the mainstream and recently got an update in 2023. You have the Argenta heritage, you have the integrated bracelet design, and you even have eye-catching colors like the textured teal dial variation. It's also worth mentioning that for the price of a Milgauss, you get a solid gold IWC Ingenieur Perpetual calendar, which, if we're talking about value for money, is pretty undeniable. Next up, the Day-Date. And this is a special one because you have to get into the mindset of someone who wants a Day-Date. For some, you buy a Day-Date because you want a trophy. Athletes want to celebrate signing a big contract by buying a Day-Date, and they want to be seen with that recognizable solid gold presidential bracelet. So nothing else really compares in that regard. On the vintage side, solid gold Day-Dates can be had for less than you might think. Again, the visual statement is likely the main appeal here, but a vintage buyer is more likely after that tropical glamour of the 1980s. Like a grandpa watch, but in the best way. Either way, we can all agree no one's buying this watch because they can't remember the day of the week. For alternatives, we'll focus on the second type of buyers, the non-athletes, since that vision is more flexible. And we'll set our price range to $20K and below. For that amount of money, you could pick up a full gold Cartier Tank Americain or a two-tone automatic Royal Oak. You could go more 1970s and get a number of niche integrated bracelet watches from AP, Patek, and Vacheron. And for just over $20K, you can get into solid gold Cartier Santos and Vacheron overseas territory. The Day-Date was designed with luxury in mind, so it's less of a spec versus spec question and more about what luxury looks like to you. Let's click on the Oyster Perpetual and the Explorer together because they share a lot of similarities in terms of design, functionality, and personality. Both fall into the broader category of no-date field watches with only the essentials at play. The relative affordability of these watches also helps widen our options here when it comes to alternatives. So let's try a few options and see how we feel. First up, we have the 36mm IWC Pilot. The visual comparison here is pretty strong, and the brand heritage is well established, but it's lacking in certain specs with a water resistance of 60 meters compared to 100, and a power reserve of 50 hours compared to 70. I'd throw in the Omega Aquaterra and the Railmaster here as well. We've covered these a few times already, and the comparison is pretty clear. Robust versatility without a lot of fuss. I'd even throw in the Cartier Santos as a daily driver alternative here. I remember reading a Fratello article pitting the Santos 2823 against the 36mm Explorer, and that comparison framed the Santos in a new light, at least for me. Finally, for a more budget option, I recommend the Nomos Club or the Nomos Ahoy. Club model family is slightly cleaner compared to the sportier Ahoy. Water resistance is 100 meters for the Club and 200 meters for the Ahoy. And like the Oyster Perpetual, you have a wide range of sizes and colors to choose from here. For the Rolex Explorer II, you get similar functionality as the GMT, but in a more low-key package. Truth be told, the Explorer family is still one of the least hype corners of Rolex, so the value for money has remained more intact than some other Rolex model families. The qualities we're looking for in our alternatives are useful and dependable without being too flashy about it. With that in mind, the strongest alternatives are coming from Tudor, Omega, and even Breitling. The Tudor Black Bay Pro is a bit thick, but a natural comparison because the design draws heavy inspiration from the Explorer II reference 1655. You may also like the look and the price of the Tudor Black Bay GMT with the red and blue bezel. For Omega, you have well-built-in functional options like the Seamaster Aquaterra GMT, the robust Planet Ocean GMT, or the Aquaterra World Time if you like to lean a little more refined. And finally, Breitling. There are options that embody that tool watch ethos and add additional layers of functionality. The Breitling Chronomat GMT is worth considering because you get a diving bezel and a GMT. Same but different, you could go for the Transocean Chronograph GMT. To sum it up, the Explorer II seems to have a wider range of alternatives because the buyer mindset is geared more towards practical reliability than the sheer power of the logo. Finally, we're ending with the Rolex Daytona. This is perhaps the most famed and certainly the most hyped watch from Rolex today. This has been especially true in the last decade thanks to the meteoric rise of rare and vintage Daytonas on the auction scene and in the secondary market. When we think about the mindset of the Rolex Daytona buyer, we think about sportiness, status, and even a little bit of aggression. The Daytona is a strong statement whether vintage or modern, steel or precious metal. So when it comes to alternatives, there are a couple ways to tackle this. One is from a horological perspective, and one is from a status perspective. We're working within a price range of roughly $15,000 to $20,000 to keep it somewhat humble. From a horological and historical perspective, the first alternatives that come to mind are the Omega Speedmaster and the Zenith El Primero. Now, the El Primero movement was used in the Daytona for a number of years, and the 16520 Zenith Daytonas have become a collectible chapter in the model's history. The El Primero has its own illustrious history as arguably the world's first automatic chronograph caliber, with notable references like the A386 and the CoverGirl, to name just two. The Omega Speedmaster is a legend worth mentioning, not only for the undeniable historical significance, but also its collectability. 321 calibers, Ed Whites, Moonshine Gold examples, and the popularity of the Snoopy have helped raise the profile of the watch. And even at a more everyday level, the standard production Moon's watch remains one of the best values in the industry. Now, from a status standpoint, you have more high horology brands like Vacheron Constantin and Parmigiani Fleurier to consider. The Tondograph from Parmigiani is perhaps too niche to attract a Daytona buyer, but the overseas chronograph of Vacheron combines that masculine energy with an integrated bracelet sport watch with solid heritage and at an exclusive price point to match. The 49140 and 49150 are roughly the starting price of a Daytona on Chrono 24, and I know what I'd decide if given the choice. Am I crazy, or are there better watches out there than a Rolex? Drop a comment below with your take, and if I missed any watches, include that as well. I'm Thomas Hendricks of Chrono 24. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.